Morning revealed the full extent of the flooding in the city of Kherson. Imagine, first you survive Russian occupation, then constant shelling, now this. The floodwater had risen 12 meters and has only started to subside in the last few hours. The elderly are the most at risk. All day long, the Ukrainian emergency services and volunteers have been rescuing those who'd been stranded, some on islands, others in neighborhoods near the riverbank. They're leaving behind their ruined possessions and homes. All they can save are their precious pets. They tried to stay put, but it was impossible.
Все сидела, все надеялась, что останемся там. А потом, как начала бежать вода с такой силой, что, ну хорошо, сынуля, додумался. У соседа взял лодку, и благодаря этому мы выбрали.
They blame the Russians for blowing up the dam.
Ну потому что русские, наверное, подбили дамбу, не подумавши, как говорится. Они нечеловечные люди. Им, как говорится, ну нет прощения, понимаете? Никак, абсолютно.
And while he was speaking, a more familiar peril, the sound of shelling. So they scrambled for cover. The Russians deny responsibility. The flood also damages the water supply to Crimea, which they control. But Ukrainian officials say this was a desperate form of defense designed to delay Ukraine's counteroffensive.
Вони зробили це свідомо, вони підірвали дамбу, вони зруйнували Каховське водосховище, щоб унеможливити наш наступ з цього напрямку в цей час, в цей проміжок часу. Що це їм дає? Це дає їм звільнення тисячі або десятки тисяч солдатів, які тримали лінію фронту вздовж цього узбережжя. Вони тепер можуть суттєво зменшити кількість своїх солдатів там і можуть їх перенаправити на інші напрямки.
In Nova Kakhovka, the site of the dam, which is under Russian control, people are returning to their homes. But it's hard to see how they'll be able to stay, and it's unclear how much assistance Russia will provide. Debris is floating downriver, including 150 tons of oil from the hydroelectric plant. The pollution is horrific. Already, hundreds of thousands of fish have perished, and agricultural land has been damaged, probably for years. Upriver, in Zaporizhia, they were practicing a nuclear drill today. The cooling system for the nearby nuclear power plant, which also depended on the dam, is not in immediate danger, but it's yet another risk in a war that keeps producing ever more reasons for fear.
Well, the people of Kherson had already lived through months of Russian occupation. Over the last 2 days, we've been hearing from residents trying to cope with the latest challenge the war has brought to their doors. Our foreign correspondent, Porrick O'Brien, has been documenting their stories.
After the surge and the shock, the creeping erosion of normal life in Kherson. Since the dam was destroyed, people have been keeping video diaries for us. Records of rescues. The minutiae of a catastrophic event, street by street. The flooding and the shelling.
Now we have rescue missions. We'll take them from boats to drive them to a hospital or to shelters.
Eugene Ursulov has been evacuating the elderly from flooded settlements along the Dnipro for 2 days now.
As you can see here, the grandpa, he was abandoned alone at his house, and looks like guys saved him and the dog.
Vladimir is 75, rescued from the roof of the home where his children were raised. He didn't want to leave until leaving was the only option. An important piece of home, though, will travel with Vladimir in the ambulance.
Uh, 5 minutes ago, there was just a massive shelling outside my window.
Julia Radeva has also been recording life for us in her flooded city.
А вы куда идете?
This neighbourhood is close to where she lives. Julia's grandfather died last year because he couldn't get the medicine he needed in Kherson while under Russian occupation. She's in no doubt that it's the Russians that are to blame for the flooding too.
I wish I could send a message to Russians, to Putin, what I feel, what I think, but I can't. It's censored, I guess.
Well, what would that be?
I would want them to be right here, right now, next to me and experience everything that we experience, because whatever you tell them or show them on the video, they say it's either fake or it's our propaganda or we are brainwashed, and the peace will come to us soon. So I just want all of them, especially Putin, next to that guy who sits on his fence by his house, halfway in the water.
Eugene also sent us this, another rescue. He says his team got to this elderly woman just in time. Eugene is worried about what will be uncovered when the waters subside, though. Worried about the ones too frail to even call for rescue.
Well, I've been speaking to the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharenko. He's just returned from Kherson, where floodwaters have been rising. He posted this on social media after the dam collapsed.
You can see how water is coming up very quickly, already several meters higher, probably maybe 3 meters higher, and we are quite far away from the dam, near 100 kilometers, but you can see how quickly the water is coming up.
Now back at his home in Odessa, I asked him what the situation is now.
The situation was really bad yesterday, and today it's even worse because the water continues to arrive. And we can't say when it will finish. Thousands of people are without their homes. Thousands of houses are destroyed. And that's the situation on the right bank of the river, which is controlled by Ukraine. But what is important at this part of, on this bank of the river, there is support to people. But on the opposite bank, on the left bank of the river, which is still controlled by Russians, people do not receive any help, any support. And that is absolutely awful. And these people are in much worse situation.
I assume you believe the Russians did this. Can you explain why they would do it if it affects their side of the territory so much?
Definitely Russians did this. Now there are two options why they did it. So first option is that they did it accidentally. The dam was mined last year. They were saying it openly that they mined the dam. And maybe some of their crazy people, maybe drunk Russian soldier, did something wrong and it was blown up. But probably I think that they did it consciously, deliberately, because they're afraid of Ukrainian counteroffensive. And this dam was the last bridge between the right bank of the river and left bank of the river.
So do you worry that this does make the counteroffensive much harder?
Definitely. In this area, that will make counteroffensive much harder. That's not the whole area of, that is just, 100 miles of front line more. But we have more, several hundred miles of the front line more. So there is place where to attack. But at this exactly place, it would be harder. I am not a military person, so I can't use the word impossible. I don't know, but definitely much harder.
What effect do you think this will have on agriculture?
There are also a very big effect. And in general, we're speaking with you, what we spoke about before, it is about short-term consequences. But the most worrying thing is the long-term consequences of this ecocide for environment, for this area, for Black Sea, because there will be such consequences. And definitely thousands of hectares of farmlands are now covered by the water. So it will have a huge impact on agriculture in Ukraine, and by this to food security of the whole world, unfortunately.
Do you believe this is a war crime?
It's definitely a war crime and one of the most awful. According to Geneva Convention, such attacks on such scale is civilian infrastructure. It equals with the usage of mass destruction weaponry. So it equals like to use a nuclear weaponry, because the results of this are unselective. And I'm not sure that any one military person died because of this, but I can tell you for sure that there are victims and casualties in between civilians, and a lot of and huge suffering for thousands of civilians and for years ahead. So definitely it's an ecocide and a huge war crime.
Alexei Goncharenko, thank you very much.